It's been one of the most fraught and divisive campaigns in modern memory, and emotions are running very high on both sides. So how do we have healthy discussions with our children about this presidential election? Joining us now to discuss is Aliza Pressman, co-founding director of the Mount Sinai Parenting Center and co-founder of Seedlings Group. Welcome, Aliza. So great to have you.
Thank you.
So children, as we know, are naturally curious, and politics is no exception. They have all sorts of questions about this political cycle, but there's been so much ugliness and nasty rhetoric. So how do we explain that to our children?
Well, since there's nothing that we can do about the fact that there's been this nasty rhetoric, and the tone of this election has been very difficult to explain to kids, it's much better to accept that and then use it for teachable moments. So we can explain to them what is wrong and what feels good about the kind of language that's coming up, and use that to help them come to some kind of understanding about what they find difficult to watch. So what are we teaching them in school and at home? If we're seeing presidential candidates using demeaning and demoralizing language that they're not allowed to use in school, or tactics for argument that they're not allowed to use in a debate on a debate team, then maybe that's a great way for them to look at this and say, what do I feel about this election process, and what do I feel about this candidate because of it?
A great teaching moment. And does that also then apply to, because there's been some bad behavior on both sides.
Absolutely.
So, you know, we look at some of these candidates and we think, are they modeling the kind of behavior we want to see our children influenced by? So is that something you should address as well?
Yes, well, one of the things to really take into account about this election is what has happened to the idea that these candidates should be the kind of candidates that make us feel proud and that make us feel like when they speak, what they're going to say is something that our children can remember and they can speak about and they can talk about, and there are going to be those quotes that they'll think about.
So we just have to let that go.
So we need to let the other part go and find the positive, especially because there have been some beautiful moments. For example, whether or not you're a Democrat or Republican, when Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high, that was something that we can use as a soundbite for our children forever, because it's a really good message, and it's a good reminder on either side that the best thing to do is to talk about the positive attributes of a candidate you support.
So concentrate on those positive qualities of the candidate you support, for the children especially. Now, we know that children tend to parrot the political opinions of their parents, but they do so in a way that's almost like cheering for a sports team, right? They sort of have a candidate that they support because they see their parents supporting it, and it's almost like it's the World Series and this is my team and I'm rooting them on, but without a deep understanding of the actual issues. And of course, this can be gratifying for a parent to hear their child parroting what you want them to say, but shouldn't we be helping them to become independent thinkers and really consider the issues?
That's a very enlightened way of thinking, that we want our children to be independent thinkers and think about the issues. We feel that way, but we often don't actually want them. We think we feel that way, but if they have a different opinion, you have to really work hard to handle that. So one thing to do is to sit down, watch just pieces of debates and discussions that have happened throughout, and you can watch them after the fact, and say, tell me what you think this issue is and why you would choose one opinion versus the other, and help them walk through, and hopefully you've modeled enough of your values and beliefs that they will agree with you. But another wonderful thing would be if they don't agree with you, that they have a very reasonable and rational reason.
Yeah, sure. You've helped them to become a critical thinker.
Yes, and that is much more important, because the right to vote and the capacity to vote comes with, it's a great privilege, but you need to be prepared for it. And we have up until they're 18 years old to prepare them so they can make great decisions.
Absolutely. Now, finally, what is your advice on the news cycle? I mean, as adults, we sort of binge on the news cycle. How much is too much for children? Should we say, okay, that's enough? And can it be actually scary for kids the way sometimes local news can be scary?
So news is basically, children shouldn't watch the news under elementary school and under. They really shouldn't watch the news. If you want to find specific moments, historic moments, a speech here and there, an acceptance speech tonight, late, if they're still awake, that you want to show them, that's wonderful. But sitting there and watching the news, when the news right now is so, it is scary. Young children don't know the difference between reality and fantasy. Elementary school children take on these worries. So if somebody says something, which we all do, people are crying about potential candidates winning.
But you have a good point about that. If the candidate that the child i.e. the child's parents, is not supporting, actually wins. How do you allay those fears for the child?
So, and this is very difficult for me to say, because of course I'm one of the parents that probably has accidentally said some negative things about a candidate. But the reality is that when you say those things, you have to be very careful because they're listening. So if you start to say something scary about a candidate, or that you're anxious about that, then they might be afraid if that particular candidate wins.
They take on your anxiety
they really
and double
do.
it.
So importantly, we all need to remember to explain to our children that we have this incredible system that doesn't allow one person to be in charge of everything and make all these big decisions. So even if they threaten to do something that might scare your child, because you've talked about it a lot, you can explain we have the executive branch where the president is, but we also have the legislature, and we have the judicial branch. So you're safe, which is not to diminish the importance of this election, and everybody is going to get out there and vote.
But the world will not end if your candidate does not win.
We have a system that works because of that.
All right. Dr. Aliza Pressman, thank you so much for all that great advice.